It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we talk your property news 7 days a week into our weekend, and as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon, Saturday, November the 16th. And good morning to Jackson and Susie on the Sunshine Coast. Thanks very much for getting in contact by way of email to tell us that you are both saving flat out for your deposit and enjoying the podcast information. And of course, you can join in on the conversation if you would like to email. Our email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. Now, this is a fairly serious subject this morning. The federal government is tackling Australia's housing crisis with a $32 billion commitment aimed at building, renting and buying homes. However, while efforts like expanding the Home Guarantee Scheme have been made, challenges such as construction delays, which are real, and we've spoken many times about that, are rising, and also rising rents and mortgage pressures are persisting. The commentators, the experts, and anyone with a conscious thought seems to be weighing in on the problem ahead, wanting a hell of a lot more action, especially implementing policies and securing infrastructure funding. And we're going to welcome in right now Maiy Azize from Everybody's Home. And good morning to you, Maiy. Welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me back.
Now, this is a real problem, homelessness, and I got to say, a few weeks ago, I watched this Australian documentary on Netflix. It's a story all about women over 55 years of age who are homeless. It's called Undercover, and if you haven't seen this, here's a little slice of it.
I actually didn't realise that all this homelessness is happening for women 55 and over.
Kicked out when I'm 84, that's not a pleasant feeling. I didn't expect it.
We've all done the right things, you know. We've got married, we've stayed at home, we've raised our children.
Everyone who looks down on homeless people thinks these people have done something wrong or they deserve it or they just need to work harder.
You're past a certain age, experience counts for nothing apparently. You can't go forward, you can't go back. I couldn't afford to live there and I couldn't afford to move.
The marriage breaks down and you don't have a house and you've got no career as such to fall back on.
Yeah, so that was really, really powerful. And once again, that documentary is called Undercover, and you can watch it right now on Netflix. Maiy, the cohort of women in this 55-plus age bracket who become homeless, it is really an indictment on where we are with the housing market and the shortage of supply to actually house them.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that women at this age are absolutely falling through the cracks, and we're seeing that a lot of women at this age may have gotten married, may have expected a bit of financial security. Often there'll be some kind of precipitating event like a marriage breakdown, and then they find that their lives are so much more precarious than they thought they were. I haven't yet watched the documentary, but a couple of months ago, our campaign Everybody's Home ran a People's Commission into Australia's housing crisis, and we had hearings. Many of the witnesses at our hearings were women in this age group. You know, we heard from a nurse. One story that really struck out to me was a nurse who was 68 years old, who works 6 days a week to be able to afford the rent on her place in Sydney, a very modest place in Sydney, and just can't afford to retire, and is also not eligible for social housing. So it is unfortunately a common story, a more common story than people know, and it's becoming more common.
What the documentary sort of pointed out to me was that this can happen to anybody. like these women, educated women in this 55 plus cohort, as you say, their situation has changed. They were married for 25, 30 plus years. They had children. The husband went out to work. Suddenly the husband leaves and they don't have enough money, if they're lucky enough to be in a position of home ownership. Once everything is carved up, they just are not in a situation to buy another house. This inequality for equity, I've talked about it before. I think so many Australians just go, look, this doesn't affect me, sorry, or they just don't want to know about it. And if we just knew somebody in that situation where we could assist in some way, collectively we could help so much in this area.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that we have this problem and the reason that the problem is growing and getting worse is because people can't afford places to live. There's only really a limit to what we can do as individuals, although, of course, it's really good that we live in communities where people are becoming more aware and alert to this and want to help. But the reason that we've seen this explosion in rates of homelessness, housing stress, rental stress over the past 40 years is because government approaches to this problem have changed. And until they change again, we're not going to see this problem solved at a large scale.
Is it so big that you wake up on mornings and go, where are we going to next with this? You've obviously got plans, you've got the dedication, the commitment to sort of follow this through politically, but it must be a tiring process.
I don't really agree that we have the commitment to follow this through politically. We aren't seeing the things that need to change. We're seeing a lot of lip service. We're seeing a lot of fake numbers being thrown around. The government has not committed any new money to housing or homelessness, but it's been able to present things such that it has some numbers to give in talking points. Until we see the government really get serious about actually doing something and not just be seen to be doing something because there's political demand for it, we aren't going to see the kinds of solutions that we need.
So let me ask you this in another way. What political entity in Australia is on the side of really pushing and helping move this forward, moving the needle? What organisation politically would you have in your corner?
I wouldn't want to approach it that way. I think we've seen the current government that we've got in the past really commit to the right kinds of solutions. So before the 2019 election, the Labor Party, when it was in opposition, was committed to building 300,000 social and affordable homes. It's now committed to building 30,000 social homes and some more what are quote unquote affordable, but basically just slightly discounted market rentals. So that's less than we're set to lose over the same period. So we've seen that in the past, people who are in government now have understood the scale of the problem and have been willing to do something about it. So I'm hopeful that they can be again. The other thing that sort of keeps me hopeful is that everything that we need to do to fix this crisis in Australia has been done before. So we used to have pretty affordable housing in Australia. And the reason for that was because between the Second World War all the way through to the early 80s, the federal government used to be a really big supplier of housing. That used to be the solution, what was seen as the solution to the housing crisis. Government builds homes and then rents them and sells them to people. We had a real change of mentality in the 80s. We saw the federal government really step back from funding, really step back from supplying housing itself. About 1 in 3 renters used to rent from the government. And that's a big part of why housing used to be so affordable. About 1 in 4 new builds used to be built by the government. Now it's fractions of that. And when you look around the world at countries that have either solved their housing crisis or avoided it altogether, they are countries where the government is a major supplier of housing. Governments have done this before, and I believe they can do it again.
Yeah, I think when we spoke to you last time, we might have actually covered off, I'm not sure if it was you or not, and having spoken to so many different people, but was it Sweden, the rent-to-own scheme?
Yeah, so there's many different countries. There's Austria, which has really large-scale social housing. About 60% of housing is housing that's rented out to people by the government, all the way through to Singapore, which has supported home ownership, where governments basically build homes and then sell them to citizens at cost. And then if citizens want to get a different kind of house, they can sell it back to the government. But it's a really big part of why housing is affordable in these countries. So it could be large-scale social housing. It could be supported home ownership. There's lots of different models, but there aren't countries that have truly solved this crisis without governments playing a major role.
Now, if you are homeless, Sydney has to be the basket case out of any city in Australia to be living. How much of a focus then is there on Sydney? Because you simply do not want to be in Sydney if you are homeless. It is a dire situation.
Sydney is really ground zero for the housing crisis. I mentioned earlier that we had a People's Commission into the housing crisis, and we had 2 days worth of hearings in Sydney, and they were really brutal. They were really heart-wrenching. People were crying. We heard from people who were homeless. We heard from people who were on the brink of homelessness. And one of the really common things that we heard from people again and again was having to move constantly. So we heard from people who were moving like 7 or 8 times in the space of 7 or 8 years because rents kept going up and they couldn't afford to keep living where they were living. And so these are people who are really on the brink of homelessness. They're spending so much of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. They're moving, all the time just to stay in places that they can afford. And there just isn't the social housing for them that they need.
Now, I talked about, what we could do collectively. Yes, it is a political issue. It's got to be solved at that level. But what can people do? Like people listening to you talk with passion and me sort of saying, yeah, what can we do? Like people listening, where can they go to if they feel like I want to help these women? What do they do? Where do they go?
So I would give a couple of different kinds of answers. The first is you should get in touch with your MP because this is a structural problem. It needs a structural solution. So I'd love to see people writing, emailing, calling their local member, writing a letter to the editor. We know that local members read their local papers and really demand those kinds of structural solutions. We need more than just talking points and media releases. We need really meaningful action. But I think for people who want to help a bit more directly, there's all sorts of things that people can do. You can make a donation to a housing or homelessness service. You can make a donation of emergency relief for people who, people are spending so much of their incomes on rents that, often emergency relief, bill support, food hampers, that kind of thing are just really important, helping them get by.
Yes, it is a problem that we need to be engaged with, no question about that. And Maiy, thank you so much for coming on this morning and talking about this real issue that is very underground, but it is out in plain sight for people to see. So thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for talking about this.
Each week, we bring you in-depth real estate discussions, including inspiring stories from homeowners, knowledgeable real estate professionals and economists. Whether you're a buyer, seller, or just a real estate enthusiast, we are your ultimate property podcast.
The Christmas planning has started at home and we're sort of transitioning into the shutdown that we're going to have over Christmas here, and we've scheduled the Christmas party, and it's been a really big year for us with a lot of expansion. It's been so busy, it's just absolutely flown by, but it'll be a good one to put behind us and we're looking forward to next year already. And Craig, I believe we had a little bet on last time we spoke about the US election. Do you recall that?
Oh, yeah. You won the bet. Wouldn't you have preferred to have lost the bet? I mean, it's going to be hellish for the next 4 years.
I don't think either outcome was a win for anybody, so I'm not too fussed about it. And when you do come over to Perth, typically I would take you out to lunch at Perugino, but I think it's on you this time, mate.
Oh yeah, no problems at all. That little deal I've got there, that'll work really nicely.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.